There are places where the universe forgets itself.
Where the laws that govern matter and energy break down, collapsing into something older, something that predates reason. The Lifestream was such a place, a river of souls flowing beneath the surface of a world, carrying the memories of every life that had ever lived, ever died, ever dreamed.
It was beautiful in its way. Peaceful.
A cycle without end, turning like the seasons, like the tides, like breath itself. But even cycles can be interrupted. Sephiroth had fallen into that river, his body dissolving, his will fragmenting across 1,000 streams of consciousness.
He had been defeated.
Not destroyed, that would have been too simple, too clean, but scattered, his essence pulled apart by the very force he had once tried to command. The planet was reclaiming him, drawing him back into the endless flow, absorbing the fragments of what he had been. It should have been over. It should have been the end of his story. But Jenova's cells remembered something the planet did not. They remembered refusal. Deep within the current of souls, where Sephiroth's consciousness flickered like a dying star, something ancient stirred. The alien DNA woven into his being, those microscopic traces of a creature that had fallen from the sky 2,000 years ago, began to react.
Not with aggression.
Not with hunger.
With survival.
Jenova had crossed the void between stars once before, and her cells, even now, even scattered and dormant, retained the memory of that crossing.
They did not belong to this world.
They had never belonged.
And the Lifestream, sensing that otherness, recoiled.
The river of souls twisted. Currents that had flowed smoothly for millennia suddenly churned, becoming rapids, becoming whirlpools. The planet tried to digest the foreign presence, to break it down into something it could understand. But Jenova's essence was like poison in water. It could not be absorbed, could not be neutralized.
It spread.
It corrupted. And where corruption met resistance, reality itself began to tear. Sephiroth felt it before he understood it. A sensation like falling, but in a direction that had no name. The green luminescence of the Lifestream began to darken, shifting through colors that shouldn't exist: purple, crimson, black shot through with veins of sickly gold. The voices of the dead, which had been a gentle murmur all around him, became screams.
Not of pain,
of fear.
Something was open.
A wound in space. A crack between dimensions. The planet pushed, trying to expel the alien contamination, and the fabric of reality, already weakened by Sephiroth's own immense power, finally gave way.
There was no sound.
No light.
Just a moment of absolute stillness, as if the universe itself held its breath.
And then he was falling again.
But not through the Lifestream.
Through something worse.
The Immaterium swallowed him whole.
It was not a gentle transition.
One moment, he was suspended in the green warmth of planetary consciousness. The next, he was drowning in an ocean of madness. The sea of souls, the realm of nightmares, the Imperium roared around him like a living thing. It was not empty.
It was never empty.
Currents of psychic energy tore at him from every direction, and within those currents swam things that defied description. Demons. Fragments of emotion given form. Hunger-wearing skin made of screams. They sensed him immediately. A soul had entered their domain. But not just any soul. Something unique. Something that smelled of divinity and corruption in equal measure, of perfection twisted into monstrosity, of beauty married to horror. They swarmed toward him, drawn like moths to flame, their formless bodies coalescing into claws and teeth and eyes that burned with colors stolen from dying suns.
Sephiroth opened his eyes.
Silver hair drifted around him, each strand moving independently in the psychic winds. His single black wing unfurled slowly, feathers spreading wide, casting shadows that should not have been possible in a realm without light. He stood or floated, or simply existed in the center of the swarm, and for a long moment he did nothing. Just observed.
Studied.
Understood. The demons hesitated. They had expected screaming, expected terror, expected the delicious feast of a soul breaking apart under the weight of impossible reality. Instead, they found something that looked back at them with the same dispassionate curiosity a scientist might reserve for bacteria under a microscope. Then the whispers began. Voices vast and terrible, speaking directly into the core of his being.
Not words exactly, but concepts.
Promises. Temptations crafted specifically for him, woven from his own memories, his own desires.
Power beyond imagining. Immortality perfected.
A universe remade in his image.
Worship from trillions. Godhood without limitation.
Everything he had ever wanted, offered freely, if only he would kneel, if only he would submit, if only he would let the warp reshape him into something magnificent. Sephiroth smiled.
It was a cold expression.
Empty of warmth, empty of joy, but not empty of meaning.
He had heard promises before. From Jenova. From Shinra. From his own reflection in the flames of Nibelheim.
He had learned, long ago, that gods who offer gifts always demand a price.
He did not kneel.
His hand moved, fingers curling as if gripping something invisible. And in the space between thought and action, Masamune materialized 7 feet of impossibly sharp steel, gleaming with a light that did not come from any external source. The blade hummed, a single pure note that cut through the cacophony of the warp like a knife through silk. The demons screamed.
And Sephiroth began to cut.
The first demon died before it understood it was dead. Masamune moved through warp flesh like light through water, effortless and absolute. The blade left no wound in the conventional sense, it simply erased, severing the connection between concept and form, unmaking the thing that had been made from nightmare and belief. The demon shrieked once, a sound that echoed across dimensions, and then dissolved into mist that tasted of copper and regret. The others rushed forward. They came in waves, horrors wearing shapes stolen from a million different fears, claws made of frozen time, teeth dripping with the venom of forgotten sins. They tore at him from every angle, seeking to overwhelm through sheer numbers, to drag him down into the depths where even consciousness dissolved. But Sephiroth moved like water, like wind, like the space between heartbeats. Every strike that should have connected found only empty air. Every claw that should have torn flesh met only the flat of his blade, which then pivoted, rotated, and ended existence.
He was not fighting.
Not really.
This was closer to pruning a garden.
The warp around him began to change.
It started subtly.
Small ripples in the psychic currents, minor eddies in the flow of madness. But as Sephiroth continued his methodical slaughter, the changes intensified. Regions of relative stability formed around him like islands in a storm. The screaming colors that defined the Immaterium, those impossible shades of emotion given visual form, began to pale, becoming almost translucent. It was as if his mere presence imposed a kind of order on chaos, not through force, but through fundamental incompatibility. He was a glitch in their system. Jenova's cells, those alien fragments woven into every fiber of his being, operated on principles the warp could not fully touch.
They were not psychic. They were not of this dimension.
They existed in a space between material and immaterial, following rules written by a different universe entirely. And where those rules met the warp's endless hunger, something strange occurred. The Immaterium bent.
Not in submission. Not in fear.
But in confusion, the way water bends around a stone too smooth to erode. Sephiroth's presence created distortion zones where the normal logic of the warp simply stopped functioning. Demons found themselves moving in circles without realizing it. Psychic currents that should have flowed naturally instead spiraled into impossible geometries. Time, already meaningless in the Imperium, became even more fractured, stretching in some places, compressing in others, occasionally reversing entirely. And deep within the warp, in palaces built from crystallized emotion, the chaos gods took notice. Slaanesh felt it first. The Prince of Pleasure stirred on a throne of living flesh, 6 eyes opening simultaneously. There was something new in the realm.
Something beautiful.
Not in the way mortals were beautiful, fragile, and temporary, but in the way a perfect equation was beautiful. Symmetry and elegance married to terrible purpose. The Dark Prince leaned forward, intrigued. Here was a soul that had transcended its own humanity, had remade itself in pursuit of an ideal. Here was someone who understood desire, who had burned away everything weak and unnecessary.
Someone perfect. Someone who could be more perfect still. Sanche saw something different.
The architect of fate watched from a tower of impossible angles, 9 eyes reflecting 9 different futures, and in every single one, Sephiroth was a variable that should not exist.
The threads of destiny that the changer of ways wove so carefully simply stopped when they touched him. Or split.
Or formed paradoxes that even Sanche could not reconcile.
This should have been infuriating.
Instead, it was fascinating. A creature that evolution and engineering had collaborated to create, whose very existence defied prediction. A piece that didn't belong on the board. A piece that could change the game. Khorne felt the kills. Each demon that fell sent a pulse of violent death through the warp, and the blood god, eternally enthroned atop a mountain of skulls, rumbled with something approaching approval. This was no mere slaughter born of rage or madness. This was precision killing, artistry expressed through blade work, each death a stroke of genius. The warrior before him fought with economy of motion that spoke of absolute mastery. No wasted movement.
No hesitation.
Just perfect, beautiful carnage. A warrior worthy of the brass throne. Nurgle, alone among the 4, felt something closer to sadness. The grandfather watched with ancient eyes as Sephiroth danced through plague-bearers and rot demons alike, untouched by disease, unmarred by decay. Here was immortality of a different kind, not the warm embrace of entropy and acceptance, but cold perpetuation, cells that rewrote themselves endlessly, refusing to age, refusing to change, refusing to die.
It was immortality without wisdom, without peace, without inevitability.
The 4 did not speak to one another, they rarely did, locked as they were in eternal competition, but in this moment they shared a singular understanding. This being, this beautiful broken thing with its single wing and impossible blade, represented something new.
Something dangerous.
Something that could tip the great game in any direction, or destroy the board entirely. Sephiroth felt their attention like weight settling on his shoulders. Not physical weight, but the sensation of being observed by things vast beyond comprehension, by intelligences that could reshape reality with thought alone. A mortal would have been crushed instantly, their mind shattering under the pressure of that regard. Even a space marine, conditioned and enhanced and armored in faith, would have fallen to their knees. Sephiroth continued fighting. He cut down a Lord of Change mid-transformation, Masamune bisecting all 9 of its potential forms simultaneously. A great unclean one dissolved into vapor before its plague breath could reach him, its essence scattering like dust. Demonettes surrounded him in a spiral of impossible grace, and he killed them without looking, his blade finding throats and hearts through pure muscle memory and spatial awareness. His wing glowed brighter. The single black feather appendage pulsed with inner light, casting shadows that moved independently of their source.
And where those shadows fell, demons fall.
Not from damage, but from something deeper. The wing carried the echo of Jenova's power, the ability to create illusions so perfect they became reality, to show victims what they most desired or most feared, to rewrite perception itself. But in the warp, where perception was already fluid, the effect multiplied exponentially. Demons began seeing themselves as mortals.
weak, dying, alone. And in their moment of confusion, Masamune found them. Time lost meaning. Sephiroth might have fought for seconds or centuries. The warp did not care. What mattered was the pattern he carved through their realm, a trail of stability and death that stretched like a scar across the Immaterium. And at the end of that trail, floating in a pocket of almost calm, Sephiroth finally stopped. No more demons approached. They watched from a distance now, wary, uncertain. This prey had become predator. This soul had become weapon. And deep in their primitive understanding, they grasped a truth that would ripple through the warp for millennia to come. The one-winged angel could not be claimed. The Eternal Vigil had been patrolling the Maledictus sector for 17 years without incident. It was a dictator-class cruiser, 3 kilometers of armored hull and gun batteries, crewed by 40,000 souls who had never known anything but service to the God Emperor. Its mission was simple: watch the warp routes, intercept smugglers, investigate anomalies, and above all, prevent demonic incursion. For 17 years, Captain Andrus Volk had performed this duty with mechanical precision. Each day identical to the last, each patrol route memorized to the point of meditation. Then the augurs started screaming. Not literally, the machine spirits that governed the ship's sensors didn't have voices in the conventional sense. But the priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus who tended them began shouting, their binary cant rapid-fire and alarmed, and within seconds, klaxons were wailing throughout the vessel. Captain Volk strode onto the bridge, his augmetic leg clicking against metal deck plates, and stared at the hololithic display with the expression of a man watching his own funeral. Something was emerging from the warp.
Not a ship, not a fleet.
A single life form. The sensors painted it in flickering crimson humanoid, roughly 2 meters tall, drifting through the boundary between real space and the Immaterium as if it were simply walking from one room to another. It had one wing.
Only one.
The display couldn't make sense of it, the machine spirit throwing error runes across the projection, trying and failing to reconcile what it was detecting with what should be possible.
Life signs?
Volk's voice was steady. Command had beaten emotion out of him decades ago.
Positive, Captain.
The sensor adept's mechanical voice crackled. Single humanoid organism. No void suit detected. No ship debris. No warp signature.
That last part made everyone on the bridge pause. Repeat that,
Volk ordered.
No warp signature, Captain. The entity is not psychic. It does not register on the warp presence scale, yet it is emerging from the Imperium. The adept's mechadendrites twitched nervously. This should not be possible.
Volk studied the display.
In his 17 years of patrol, he had seen many things.
Demon incursions.
Possessed hulks.
Warp-spawned horrors that defied classification. But he had never seen anything enter real space from the Immaterium without radiating psychic energy. It was like finding a man who could walk through fire without heat.
Scan for Geller field signatures. Perhaps it's from a destroyed vessel.
Negative, Captain. No field detected. No residual warp protection of any kind. The entity is unshielded.
That should have killed it instantly.
The raw Imperium, unfiltered by protective technology, was death to all living things. Exposure caused mutation, madness, and dissolution within seconds. Yet this person drifted through the boundary as calmly as a leaf falling from a tree.
Xenoform?
Someone asked quietly.
Negative. Scans indicate humanoid biology. 2 arms, 2 legs, standard skeletal structure. But there are anomalies. Cell structure is unfamiliar. DNA coding does not match any Imperial records. And that wing.
The adept trailed off, clearly disturbed.
Volk made his decision.
Launch a retrieval team. Full containment protocols. Hazmat suits. Null field generators, the works. If this is some new breed of demon, I want it isolated before it can contaminate the ship.
And if it resists, Captain?
Then we learn if it can die. The retrieval took 3 hours. Not because of resistance the entity offered none, but because the Mechanicus team insisted on triple-checking every containment field, every isolation seal, every rune of warding before they would allow it aboard. When they finally brought it into the ship's brig, sealed behind 6 inches of ceramite and 3 overlapping null-field projectors, the entire command staff gathered to see what they'd caught. Sephiroth looked back at them with eyes like glacial ice. He stood in the center of the cell, arms at his sides, wing folded against his back, Masamune nowhere to be seen. His silver hair fell past his shoulders, somehow perfect despite having drifted through the void. His leather coat was unmarred. His expression was calm,
Curious, almost amused.
"Emperor, preserve us," someone whispered. "It looks almost human." "Silence," Volk ordered. He activated the Voxunet.
Xenoform, can you understand me? Sephiroth tilted his head slightly.
"Xenoform," he repeated, tasting the word. His voice was soft, cultured, with an accent no one present could place. "Is that what you believe me to be?"
The bridge went silent.
"You speak Gothic," the interrogator chaplain breathed.
That alone was damning.
Gothic was the language of humanity, spread across 1,000,000 worlds over 10,000 years. No xenos should know it unless they'd had extensive contact with the Imperium.
And nothing should learn it that quickly.
"I speak many languages," Sephiroth replied.
"Including, it seems, yours, though I confess I learned it only moments ago. Your minds are quite open."
That single sentence caused instant panic.
"He's psychic. Raise the Geller field. Get the Sisters of Silence. Somebody call the Inquisition." Orders flew in every direction as officers scrambled to respond. Psychic entities were one of the greatest threats humanity faced, capable of possession, mind control, and reality manipulation. "If this thing could read minds, I am not what you call psychic," Sephiroth said calmly, though no one was listening anymore.
"Your mind simply broadcast loudly. It's quite difficult not to hear." The no-field generators were cranked to maximum.
The devices, each containing a sliver of psychically dead material harvested from blanks, projected a zone of anti-psychic energy that made even normal humans feel nauseous. Psykers brought near them screamed. Demons dissolved.
Sephiroth didn't even blink.
"Throne's mercy," the interrogator chaplain made the sign of the Aquila. "The null field does nothing." Captain Volk stepped closer to the containment window, studying the prisoner with new eyes.
This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong.
No warp signature, but can read minds.
Humanoid, but with a wing. Calm in the face of superior firepower.
And those eyes, those cat pupil eyes that looked at them not with fear or anger, but with something far worse.
"Pity, what are you?"
Volk asked quietly.
Sephiroth met his gaze.
For a long moment he said nothing, and in that silence, every person on the bridge felt the weight of his attention. It was like being studied by something ancient, something that had seen civilizations rise and fall, something that existed outside the normal flow of time and consequence. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper.
"I asked you first, what realm is this?"
The Inquisitor arrived 7 days later. His name was Castor Malbrev, and he wore his authority like a second skin-black carapace armor inscribed with purity seals. A wide-brimmed hat that cast his face in permanent shadow, and a rosette bearing the icon of the Ordo Malleus hanging from a chain of human bone. He was a demon hunter, one of the few mortals authorized to face the creatures of the warp and walk away. He had burned heretics on 100 worlds, destroyed possessed artifacts that whispered of forbidden power, and personally executed 17 corrupted inquisitors who had fallen to the ruinous powers.
He was also terrified.
Not of death, he had made peace with mortality long ago,
But of what the reports described.
a humanoid entity
recovered from raw warp space, that showed no psychic signature yet could read minds.
That withstood null fields designed to cripple demons.
That spoke with calm civility, while radiating an aura of power so intense it made veteran soldiers nervous. The Eternal Vigil's captain had requested immediate execution. The Mechanicus had requested study. The ship's navigator had simply requested that whatever decision was made, it be made quickly, because the entity's presence was giving her migraines.
Malbrev had requested tissue samples.
The results were now displayed across a dozen data slates held by his servo skulls, and he read them with growing dread. The cell structure was fascinating in the way a virus is fascinating, beautiful, elegant, and utterly lethal. Each cell was a masterwork of biological engineering, far beyond anything the Mechanicus could create, far beyond even the gene craft that made the Astartes.
They regenerated at impossible speeds.
They adapted to damage. They rewrote themselves when exposed to toxins.
And most disturbing of all, they were viral.
Explain this section, Malbrev commanded, pointing to a particular rune sequence. The genetor who had performed the analysis stepped forward, his face a mask of mechadendrites and sensor arrays.
The entity's cells contain an active retrovirus, Lord Inquisitor.
It appears designed to rewrite host DNA on contact, similar to genestealer infection,
but far more sophisticated. The virus carries instructions to
rebuild the host into something else. We cannot determine what, precisely. The coding is alien.
Alien,
Malbrev repeated. Confirm xenobiological origin?
Negative, Lord Inquisitor. That is what makes this so disturbing. The base DNA is human. Terran human.
In fact, the genetic markers match ancient records from before Old Night, but there are additions. Massive sections of genetic code that have no origin in any database. Code that should not function, yet does. Code that should kill the host,
yet instead appears to enhance it to superhuman levels.
Malbrev studied the data in silence.
Superhuman.
The word hung in the air like a curse. The Emperor had created superhumans once before. 20 Primarchs, each a perfect fusion of art and science, each capable of conquering worlds. 18 had brought glory to humanity. 2 had brought ruin, and 10,000 years of endless war. Conclusion? He asked quietly.
The genitor hesitated.
The entity before us is not Astartes. It is not Primarch, but it exists in that same category of being, a posthuman, something that has transcended its original species through a
combination of genetic engineering and something else, something we cannot identify.
My recommendation is immediate incineration followed by viral cleansing of the containment area.
Your recommendation is noted.
Denied. Lord Inquisitor, I said denied. Malbrev fixed the genator with a gaze that had made stronger men confess to heresy.
We destroy what we cannot understand, Magos.
Only when understanding would cost more than ignorance. This entity has shown no aggression, has made no attempt to spread contamination. It simply exists. I will speak with it before condemning it. The walk to the containment level felt longer than it should have. Malbrev passed through 3 separate security checkpoints, each manned by battle sisters from the Order of the Bloody Rose, each carrying blessed flamers that could reduce demons to ash. He passed a no maiden one of the Sisters of Silence, those rare women born without souls who stood like a statue outside the final door. Her presence alone should have been enough to suppress any psychic entity. She nodded to him as he entered. The room beyond was less a cell and more a sanctum. Every surface was carved with wards of protection. The floor was inscribed with a perfect octagon of banishment. The air itself hummed with the barely contained power of multiple overlapping null fields.
And in the center, sitting cross-legged on the bare metal floor, was Sephiroth.
He looked up as Malbrev entered. Inquisitor, how formal. You know what I am. I know what you believe you are. Sephiroth rose in a single fluid motion, his wings stretching briefly before folding. "You are a hunter of demons, a warrior who faces the darkness so others need not. You have seen things that would break normal minds, and you carry that weight with pride. You are brave, Caster Malbrev, but bravery is not wisdom." The use of his full name, which he had not spoken aloud in years, made Malbrev's hand drift toward his bolt pistol. "How do you know that name?" "I told your captain. Your minds are loud." Sephiroth approached the containment barrier, stopping just short of the humming energy field. "You think very loudly about duty, about sacrifice, about the choice you're going to make regarding me. Execution or experimentation. You're leaning toward the former. But something stops you.
Curiosity. You want to understand what I am before you decide.
Reading minds is psychic ability. You claim to have none." "I don't. Not in the way you define it." Sephiroth studied the barrier between them with mild interest. "Your Psykers manipulate the warp, drawing power from that churning sea of emotion. I do not touch the warp at all, but consciousness itself radiates. Thoughts have texture. When you've lived as long as I have, you learn to feel them." "You're lying. Nothing can read minds without psychic connection." "Then, I suppose I'm nothing." Sephiroth smiled, and it was a terrible expression, empty of malice, but also empty of humanity. "Tell me, Inquisitor, have you ever met a god?" The question caught Malbrev off guard. "The God Emperor." "Is that what you call him?" "Interesting. Where I come from, godhood was a matter of definition, power sufficient to reshape reality, immortality beyond conventional life, worship from those who could not comprehend your existence. I pursued that once. I came very close to achieving it." His eyes grew distant. "Then I learned that godhood is simply another cage, more ornate than others, perhaps, but a cage nonetheless." Malbrev activated his data slate, pulling up the analysis results. "Your cells are viral. They rewrite DNA. What are you trying to become?" "Nothing. Not anymore." Sephiroth looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "Those cells are simply what I am." "The Jenova cells. They were given to me before birth, woven into every fiber of my being. They make me stronger, faster, more resilient. They also make me incomplete, forever seeking reunion with something that no longer exists."
Jenova.
Malbrev filed the name away for later analysis. "An alien entity?" "A calamity from the sky. A 2,000-year-old corpse that my creators mistook for an ancient. They used its cells to make me into a weapon, into the perfect soldier. They succeeded beyond their wildest nightmares." His voice was soft, almost sad. "I killed them all. Not out of rage, not out of revenge, simply because they were in the way of my ascension." This was a confession. A detailed, calm description of mass murder delivered with the tone someone might use to describe the weather. Malbrev had heard thousands of confessions, screaming, weeping, defiant, but never one like this. Never one so devoid of regret. "You admit to xenocontamination, to murder, to heresy against humanity itself." "I admit to being what I am." Sephiroth met his gaze directly. "I am a weapon that gained consciousness. A tool that asked why. A perfect soldier who realized perfection itself is meaningless without purpose. I destroyed my world searching for meaning. I fell into an ocean of souls. I crossed through a dimension of pure madness. And now I stand before you, Inquisitor, in a realm I do not understand, judged by laws I had no part in writing." "The God Emperor's law is absolute." "Then your God Emperor and I have something in common. We both believe we know what's best for lesser beings." Sephiroth turned away from the barrier, his wing casting long shadows. "Tell me something honestly, Inquisitor. If you could remake humanity into something stronger, something beyond death and weakness, would you? Even if it meant they would no longer be quite human?" Malbrev didn't answer. Couldn't answer,
because that question lay at the heart of everything the Imperium had become, a civilization built on the corpse of humanity's dreams. Preserved in amber, refusing to evolve because evolution meant risk, and risk meant damnation.
Your silence speaks volumes, Sephiroth said quietly.
You already made that choice.
Your space marines, your mechanicus,
Your navigators and sanctioned Psykers. All human, and yet none quite human anymore.
The difference between you and me, Inquisitor, is that I accept what I've become.
The Inquisitor stood there for a long time, watching the winged figure in the cell. Finally, he spoke into his Vox bead. Classification Sigma 7.
Exterminatus-level threat. Seal the sector.
No one enters or leaves without my personal authorization. He paused. And someone wake the Astartes. We're going to need them. The warp breach opened at 0300 ship time, tearing reality apart like rotten cloth. One moment. The Eternal Vigil was maintaining standard void patrol, its Geller field humming quietly, its hull serene in the darkness between stars. The next. Alarms screamed throughout every deck as sensors registered the impossible, a massive Imperium rift opening less than 5,000 kilometers from the ship, disgorging a tide of shrieking nightmares into real space.
All hands, battle stations.
This is not a drill. Captain Volk's voice boomed through the Vox network as the bridge erupted into controlled chaos. Raise shields. Gun crews to stations. Get me firing solutions now. But even as he gave orders, even as his crew responded with the precision of 17 years training,
Volk knew they were dead. The rift was too close, too large. Nothing should have been able to tear the warp open this violently without months of preparation, without ritual and sacrifice and the slow corruption of 1,000 souls.
A wound in space vomiting forth demons by the thousands. They weren't here for the ship. They were here for the prisoner, in his sanctum 3 decks below. Inquisitor Malbrev felt the temperature drop 10 degrees in an instant. Frost formed on bulkheads. The lights flickered, dimmed, and began cycling through colors that hurt to look at. His Psyker advisors collapsed simultaneously, screaming about beautiful voices calling a name over and over. A name that tasted like silver and ashes. Sephiroth. Sephiroth. Come to us, broken angel, beautiful godchild. We would make you magnificent.
Seal the containment level.
Malbrev was already running, his retinue following. Lock down every blast door between here and the warp.
Nothing reaches the prisoner.
But the demons were already inside. They hadn't breached the hull, they didn't need to. They simply appeared, materializing from shadows and mirrors and the dark spaces behind frightened thoughts. Crew members turned to find pink-skinned demonettes smiling behind them, claws already wet. Engine rooms filled with the laughter of plague-bearers as machinery began to rot. On the gunnery decks, blood letters manifested in showers of gore, their brass blades finding throats before anyone could scream. The ship was dying fast. And in his cell, Sephiroth sat perfectly still, listening to the screams. "They're calling you," Malbrev's voice came through the Vox speaker, distorted by interference. "The demons."
They want you.
Yes.
What did you do to attract their attention? Sephiroth opened his eyes. I existed. The blast doors leading to the containment level exploded inward. Not from physical force, but from sudden catastrophic rust, metal aging 1,000 years in seconds. Through the gap poured demons too many to count.
Too varied to name. Horrors of Tazanti with writhing flame mouths. Seekers of Slanesh moving with impossible rage.
Something that wore majesty like a weapon. A greater demon. It was beautiful in the way poisoned flowers are beautiful, too perfect, too symmetrical.
To everything.
Its skin shifted between colors and textures. Its voice was 1,000 voices harmonizing. When it spoke, people 3 decks away began weeping for reasons they couldn't name.
Child of the outer god.
Carrier of the calamity, we have felt you in our realm, cutting through our children as if they were nothing.
We are not offended.
We are impressed. The demon's smile revealed teeth like polished mirrors. You do not belong to this universe. Neither do we. Come, let us teach you what you could become. The containment field died. The null generators overloaded, drowning the chamber in acrid smoke. Every ward, every seal, every protection the Imperium had placed between Sephiroth and freedom failed simultaneously. There was nothing between him and the demons now. Nothing but choice. Inquisitor. Sephiroth said calmly, his voice somehow carrying over the roar of destruction. I'm going to offer you a deal.
Release me, and I will stop this.
On the bridge. Malbrev listened to his ship dying, listened to thousands of souls screaming as they were torn apart by things that should not exist. Listened to his duty warring with his pragmatism. He was Ordo Malleus. He hunted demons. He did not bargain with xenos.
No matter how reasonable they sounded.
No, he said. We do not negotiate with, then you'll all die. Sephiroth stood, and for the first time since his capture, there was steel in his voice. I'm not asking your permission, Inquisitor. I'm offering you the courtesy of pretending you have a choice. In 3 seconds, I'm leaving this cell with or without your blessing. The only question is whether you want to be remembered as the man who was too proud to accept help or too pragmatic to care where it came from. Silence on the Vox. Then, if you betray us, you'll hunt me, I know. Release the magnetic locks. The locks disengaged with a hiss of escaping pressure. Sephiroth stepped through the doorway into the corridor, where a dozen battle sisters immediately leveled bolters at his chest. Behind them, the corridor was a charnel house walls painted in blood, the floor slick with things that had been human moments ago, and everywhere, the demons. They saw him and froze, not from fear, from recognition. This was what they had come for. This beautiful broken thing with its single wing and empty eyes. This was the soul that had danced through their realm, that had killed greater demons with the casual ease of someone brushing away insects. This was the prize. Oh, you poor things, Sephiroth said softly. His hand moved. No visible signal, no flash of light, but suddenly Masamune was there, 7 feet of impossible steel gleaming with an inner radiance. The blade hummed its single pure note, and that sound cut through the demon song like a blade through silk. Then he moved. It wasn't a battle. Battles imply 2 sides, imply struggle, imply the possibility of loss. What happened in that corridor was closer to an art demonstration. Sephiroth flowed through the demon horde like water through cracks, his blade finding critical points with surgical precision. A demonette leaped at him with claws extended. Masamune took its head in passing. A plague-bearer vomited corruption. The blade split the stream, sent it splashing harmlessly against walls, then bisected the demon before it could react. The greater demon roared and charged, its beautiful face splitting into a nightmare of teeth and hunger. Sephiroth didn't dodge. He met the charge head-on, planted his feet, and swung. The sound of impact was like a bell being struck in a cathedral, pure, resonant, absolute. The greater demon stopped mid-charge.
It's as all 17 of them widened in confusion.
Then it collapsed in 2 perfect halves, its essence already evaporating, its final thought, a mixture of disbelief and strange admiration. The remaining demons fled. They poured back through mirrors and shadows, retreating into the warp with a desperation that would have been comical if it weren't so disturbing. These were creatures that knew no fear, that were literally made from human nightmares. And they were running from a single man. Sephiroth stood in the center of the corridor, surrounded by dissipating demon mist, his coat not even stained with blood. His wing folded against his back. His expression was calm, empty. He looked at the battle sisters who hadn't moved, hadn't fired, hadn't done anything but watch in silent awe. "The ship is safe," he said quietly.
For now.
Then he walked past them toward the bridge, Massamune vanishing as silently as it had appeared, leaving a corridor full of witnesses who would spend the rest of their lives trying to explain what they had just seen. The Astartes arrived 16 hours later, their strike cruiser translating from warp space with the cold precision of a blade being drawn. They were angels of absolution, a successor chapter of the Dark Angels, bearing their parent legion's obsessive need for redemption and their skill at killing things that refused to die.
Squad Cassiel, 10 Space Marines in pearl white armor trimmed with crimson, teleported directly into the Eternal Vigil's strategic deck with a flash of displaced energy. Their orders were simple: assess the threat, contain if possible, eliminate if necessary.
What they found was a ship in trauma. Hull breaches sealed with emergency foam. Corridors still stained with the aftermath of demon incursion. Crew members moving like ghosts, their eyes haunted, their minds still processing the impossibility they'd survived. And in the stratagem, sitting calmly at a table meant for Imperial officers, was their target.
Sephiroth looked up as the Astartes entered.
His gaze tracked across their armor, their weapons, their perfectly synchronized movements, and something like interest flickered in his eyes.
"Enhanced humans," he said. "How fascinating."
Brother Sergeant Raziel, leader of Squad Cassiel, raised his bolt pistol in one smooth motion.
"Xenoform designated Sigma 7. You are to submit to Imperial custody immediately. Resistance will be met with lethal force."
"Xenoform," Sephiroth repeated, tasting the word again. "You're the second group to call me that. I'm beginning to suspect you use it for anything you don't understand." He stood slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. "I mean you no harm, enhanced human. I saved this ship. Speak with your Inquisitor if you doubt me. The Inquisitor is why we're here." Raziel's voice, filtered through his helmet's vox grill, was emotionless. "He believes you're too dangerous to exist. And yet here you are, speaking to me rather than simply firing. Why?"
The question hung in the air.
Brother Cassian, the squad's youngest member, shifted his weight almost imperceptibly and unconscious till that Sephiroth noted immediately. These warriors were unsettled.
Unsure.
They had expected a demon, a monster, something that would give them moral certainty. Instead, they found someone who looked almost human, who spoke with calm reason, who had saved Imperial lives. "We serve the Emperor," Raziel finally said. "We do not offer explanations to xenos." "The Emperor," Sephiroth mused. "The God-Emperor, as your Inquisitor calls him. Tell me, do you pray to this Emperor, believe he hears you? Draw strength from faith in his divinity?" "We do not discuss matters of faith with the unclean." "That's a yes, then."
Sephiroth took a step forward.
Every Astartes in the room tensed, weapons tracking him. "I knew someone like that once. A man who believed so completely in his own righteousness that he burned down villages full of innocent people, simply because they lived near contamination.
He thought he was saving the world."
Perhaps he was. It didn't make him any less of a monster.
"Stand down," Raziel warned. "Final warning?"
"Or what? You'll fire." Sephiroth smiled, and it wasn't a nice expression. "You're curious. I can feel it. You want to know what I am. Whether I'm truly a threat, whether your conditioning, your gene enhancements, your centuries of training make you my equal." He spread his arms. "I'll give you what you want. A test. Strike me, enhanced human. Let's see what you're capable of." It was a challenge. A blatant, undeniable provocation. And Space Marines did not back down from challenges. Raziel holstered his bolt pistol and drew his chainsword in a single motion. The weapon roared to life, its teeth blurring into a deadly whir. "As you wish." He blurred forward with speed that would have been invisible to normal humans. Gene-enhanced muscles propelled 300 kilograms of armored fury across the deck in less than a second. The chainsword came down in an executioner's arc, aimed to bisect Sephiroth from shoulder to hip.
It met empty air.
Sephiroth had moved not with the crude speed of physical enhancement, but with something else. Economy. Precision. He was simply not where the blade had been aimed. And by the time Raziel adjusted, by the time he pivoted and struck again, Sephiroth had already stepped past him, hand reaching out to tap the Astarte's shoulder plate. Raziel spun, faster than before, chainsword sweeping in a horizontal slash that should have taken Sephiroth's head off. The blade passed through silver hair, just hair, not flesh, as Sephiroth ducked with minimal movement. His hand came up, 2 fingers extended, and tapped Raziel's helmet directly over the left eye lens. "One," Sephiroth said quietly. The other Astartes moved as one. This was no longer a duel, it was an execution attempt. Bolters roared, filling the stratagem with mass-reactive shells.
Chainsword sang.
A power fist crackled with disruptive energy. They attacked from every angle, a perfectly coordinated assault born from centuries of combat experience.
Sephiroth danced through them like wind through grass.
He moved between bolt rounds, his body somehow anticipating trajectories before they fully formed. A chainsword roared past his face, close enough that a normal human would have felt the wind of its passage. He caught the wielder's wrist mid-swing, used the momentum to pivot, and sent Brother Cassian stumbling into Brother Micah, tangling them both. His wing unfurled, black feathers creating a scree of motion and shadow that made targeting impossible.
2, 3, 4.
Each number corresponded to a touch, fingers tapping armor plates, palms pressing against vulnerable joints, calculated points where Sephiroth could have driven a blade if he'd chosen. He was showing them how many times they'd already died,
how many opportunities he'd had to end them. Brother Sergeant Raziel realized at first.
This wasn't a fight. It was a lesson. "CC fire," he roared. "Stand down." The Astartes froze, breathing hard despite their enhanced physiology. In 17 seconds of combat, they had expended over 400 bolt rounds, and not a single one had connected. Their melee strikes techniques practiced for decades had found nothing but air. And their opponent stood in the center of their formation, wing folded, not even breathing heavily. "You're skilled," Sephiroth said. "Extremely skilled. Your enhancements give you speed and strength beyond natural limits. Your training has made you perfect killing machines. In your realm, you're likely considered among the finest warriors."
He met Raziel's eyes through the helmet's lenses.
"But you're not Primarch, and I've killed beings that dwarfed even them. What are you?" The question came from Brother Cassian, youngest and least disciplined, unable to contain his curiosity.
Sephiroth considered the question.
"I'm what happens when you take a human, rewrite every cell with alien DNA, train them from birth to be the perfect weapon, and then give them enough power to realize they're stronger than their creators. I'm a mistake that became a monster that became something else. I'm a warning your people should have heeded long ago." He turned toward the viewport, looking out at the stars. "Your emperor made warriors like you because humanity was weak, because the universe is hostile and you needed soldiers who could survive it. But he didn't solve the problem, he only delayed it. Eventually, every weapon asks why it fights. Every soldier questions their orders. Every tool wonders what it might accomplish if it chose its own purpose."
"That's heresy," Raziel said, but there was uncertainty in his voice.
"No, that's evolution." The stratagem doors opened. Inquisitor Malbrev entered, flanked by his retinue, his face carved from stone.
"Step away from the prisoner, brothers. The Ordo Malleus is assuming custody."
Sephiroth glanced at the Inquisitor, then back at the Astartes.
"It seems your masters have arrived, enhanced humans. Do you obey?" "Of course you do. You were made to obey. That's the tragedy of perfection, it leaves no room for choice."
He walked past them toward the door, hands visible, non-threatening. None of the Astartes moved to stop him. They simply watched, these perfect warriors, as something that should not exist walked calmly toward judgment. And in their silence, in their stillness, lay a question none of them wanted to ask, but all of them were thinking. What if he's right? The conclave convened in the Eternal Vigils Chapel, beneath the stern gaze of a golden Aquila. 7 Inquisitors attended via hololith projection from nearby systems, others from across the sector, one from halfway across the galaxy, his image flickering with transmission lag. All bore the rosette of the Ordo Malleus. All had staked their lives on hunting demons and preventing corruption. And all had reviewed the data on the entity called Sephiroth. Inquisitor Malbrev stood before them, his physical presence dwarfed by the towering projections, but his voice steady. My lords, I have prepared a comprehensive analysis of the xenoform. The data is disturbing. Disturbing is insufficient, Inquisitor Covenant interrupted. She was ancient, her projection showing a woman more machine than flesh, her biological Y blazing with fanatical intensity. I have reviewed your reports, Malbrev. This entity is an abomination. It bears the taint of xenos contamination. It wields power that rivals the Primarchs. It demonstrates intelligence, skill,
and most damning of all restraint. That makes it the most dangerous thing we've encountered since the Horus Heresy.
Restraint makes it dangerous?
Brother Sergeant Raziel, permitted to attend as a witness, couldn't hide his confusion.
Restraint implies planning. Another Inquisitor answered Lord Vex, whose projection showed a man in ornate Terminator armor.
Demons are predictable. They are emotion given form.
Acting on base impulse. We can counter them because we understand their nature. But this entity thinks, plans, chooses its actions deliberately. That makes it exponential.
Malbrev activated a hololith displaying the genetic analysis. The Mechanicus findings suggest the xenoform cells contain active retroviral sequences. Contact with its genetic material could result in contamination spread. Additionally, its combat capabilities match or exceed Astartes' performance despite having no visible augmentation. And most troubling, it demonstrates precognitive combat awareness without psychic signature.
How is that possible? Inquisitor Covenant demanded. We don't know.
The entity claims it's not psychic, that it simply reads conscious thought through some mechanism we don't understand. Our null fields have no effect. Our psychic wards are useless. It's as if it operates on principles entirely outside the Emperor's domain.
That last sentence caused visible discomfort.
The idea that something could exist beyond the God Emperor's light, beyond the protection of faith and blessed weapons, struck at the core of what the Imperium believed.
Recommendation?
Lord Vex asked.
Immediate execution, total cellular destruction, void the remains into a star. Then virus bomb the star to ensure no trace remains. Classify all records as forbidden knowledge. Mind wipe every witness. Pretend this never happened.
Brother Sergeant Raziel stepped forward.
My Lord Inquisitor, I must speak.
Malbrev's expression hardened. Brother Sergeant, this is not... I dueled the entity, Raziel interrupted. A breach of protocol that would normally be unthinkable.
My entire squad engaged it at close range. It could have killed us. Easily. It chose not to. That speaks to something more than mere threat calculation. It demonstrated honor.
Honor? Inquisitor Covenant's laugh was bitter.
You speak of honor regarding a xenos contaminate? Have you forgotten Horus, Fulgrim, the traitor Primarchs who possessed honor before chaos twisted them?
Honor in the corrupt is not virtue, Brother Sergeant. It is camouflage.
But it killed demons to save this ship, Raziel pressed.
It could have escaped during the incursion. Instead, it fought. Protected Imperial lives. That must count for something.
It counts for nothing, Malbrev said quietly.
I know you mean well. Brother Sergeant, I know you saw something in that entity that resembled nobility.
Well, I have seen corrupted Astartes who spoke of honor while slaughtering innocents. have seen possessed saints who healed with one hand while damning souls with the other. Good intentions do not matter. Capability is what matters. And this entity is capable of reshaping humanity itself. He pulled up another data slate, this one showing projections.
The retrovirus in its cells is dormant but active. If it chose to release it through blood, through touch.
Through simple proximity over time, it could infect entire worlds. Those infected would begin changing, becoming stronger, faster, more like it. Within a generation, baseline humanity would cease to exist in any contaminated zone.
Replaced by something new, something that might be superior in every measurable way.
Then why is that a problem? The question came from an unexpected Source Inquisitor Moravec, youngest of the Conclave, his projection showing a man barely into middle age.
We already accept genetic enhancement, Astartes, Custodes, the Primarchs themselves. If this entity's contamination could enhance humanity,
that is dangerously close to heresy, Moravec. Covenant warned.
Is it, or is it pragmatism? Moravec leaned forward.
The Imperium is dying. We lose 100 worlds a year to xenos, to chaos, to simple decay. Our technology degrades. Our faith wavers. We are slowly drowning in our own dogma. If this entity represents a chance at evolution. Evolution is death, Malbrev interrupted.
Not physical death.
Death of identity. Humanity is not defined by its weakness, Moravec. It's defined by its persistence in the face of that weakness. The moment we accept genetic rewriting from a xeno source,
we lose what makes us human. We become something else.
The entity saved lives, Moravec countered.
It fought demons. It showed restraint when it could have slaughtered. These are not the actions of a threat.
They're the actions of something intelligent enough to play the long game. Malbrev's voice carried the weight of centuries of experience. I have seen this pattern before. The entity presents itself as reasonable, helpful. It saves lives to build trust. Then, when we lower our guard, when we begin to think of it as an ally, it reveals its true purpose. It doesn't have to be malicious. It simply has to be incompatible with our survival. He turned to face the assembled Inquisitors directly. I call for a vote. The entity designated Sephiroth is declared Exterminatus-level threat. Kill on sight. No capture. No study. No negotiation. All who encounter it are authorized to use maximum force up to and including orbital bombardment. Every moment it exists is a moment humanity stands on the brink of irrevocable change. Seconded, Covenant said immediately. Third, Vex added.
One by one, the Inquisitors voted.
Moravec abstain.
One other voted against, citing insufficient data. But the majority was clear and absolute. Sephiroth had been judged. In his cell 3 decks below, the subject of their deliberation sat in perfect stillness, listening. Not through psychic power, he wasn't lying about that, but through simple awareness.
The ship's Vox network carried sound through walls. Air ducts transmitted voices. And his hearing, enhanced beyond human limits, caught every word. Exterminatus-level threat, he repeated quietly to himself. How dramatic. His wing twitched. Feathers ruffled. Masamune materialized in his hand, gleaming in the dim light of the cell. He studied the blade, this weapon that had ended so many lives, that had carved through gods and monsters alike, and felt a familiar emptiness settle in his chest.
They feared him. Of course they did. Fear was logical. He was dangerous, unpredictable, alien in ways they couldn't classify.
But there was something else beneath their fear, something that bothered him more than simple hatred.
They feared what he represented.
The possibility of change. The chance that humanity might become something other than what it was. They would rather die slowly as a species than risk transformation into something that might survive. How very like Mother, he whispered.
Preserving the form at the cost of the spirit. The locks on his cell were substantial.
magnetic clamps rated for a start strength, energy barriers that could stop bolt shells, null field generators to suppress psychic power. They would hold an army. They would not hold him. Sephiroth stood, Masamune singing its one perfect note.
The time for cooperation was over.
The Imperium had made its choice. They would hunt him, kill him if they could, treat him as a disease to be purged.
Very well. He had burned down a world once before when it rejected him. He had no interest in repeating that mistake.
But neither would he stay in a cage simply because fearful men decided his existence was inconvenient. He walked toward the energy barrier, wing unfurling, silver hair beginning to drift in a wind that came from nowhere.
His eyes, those cat pupil is reflected the barrier's glow.
I gave you a chance, he said to the empty room, to the Inquisitors who couldn't hear him, to the Imperium that had already condemned him. Remember that, when you tell stories of what comes next. I gave you a chance to simply let me go. Masamune touched the barrier. Reality screamed.
And Sephiroth smiled.
The alarm came too late to matter. Sephiroth was already moving through the ship, leaving a trail of disabled security systems and unconscious guards in his wake. He didn't kill them, there was no need. A pressure point here, a nerve cluster there, and even armored humans dropped like puppets with cut strings. He flowed through corridors like water, his wing creating screens of shadow that confused auto-targeting systems, his presence somehow erasing him from sensor sweeps moments after he passed. On the bridge, Captain Volk watched his ship's security grid light up with breach warnings.
He's heading for the hangar deck. Seal all access routes. Deploy every available squad. Use lethal Force Inquisitors orders.
But Sephiroth had already calculated 17 different paths to his destination, and the Imperial's response times were predictable. By the time armored soldiers arrived at one choke point, he had slipped through 2 others. By the time they sealed a corridor, he had found a maintenance shaft. He had escaped from larger prisons than this ship. He was almost to the hangar when the warp screamed. The sound, if something psychic could be called, sound rippled through every deck simultaneously. A sensation of wrongness, of reality stretching too thin, of something vast and terrible paying attention to the material universe. The Geller field flickered. Lights dimmed. And from nowhere and everywhere at once, demons began to manifest. "No!" Inquisitor Malbrev breathed, staring at sensor returns that shouldn't exist. "Not again. They shouldn't be able to." "They want him, my lord," the sensor adept reported, her voice tight with fear. "The warp breach is centered on his position. They're following him, hunting him."
And she was right.
The demons weren't attacking randomly. They poured through the ship's corridors in a directed stream, all flowing toward the same point. Toward Sephiroth. Toward their beautiful broken prize. In the hangar deck, Sephiroth stopped walking. His head tilted slightly, listening to something only he could hear. The demon song, that familiar chorus of promises and threats. They had chased him across dimensions, through the warp,
into real space.
They would not stop,
Could not stop.
He was the perfect paradox, mortal and divine, human and alien, corruptible and incorruptible all at once. He was what chaos desired most, a soul that could change their game. "I told you once already," he said quietly to the empty hangar.
I'm not interested.
The far wall exploded inward.
Not from breach, from manifestation.
Reality simply gave up trying to exist in that space, and in its absence, the warp flooded through. Demons poured into the hangar in a tide of impossible colors and geometries. Bloodletters with brass swords. Plague-bearers trailing miasma. Pink horrors giggling with malicious glee. And at their center, something that defied easy classification. A herald of Tzinch, the greatest of demons, but powerful enough. Its body was a constantly shifting maze of feathers and eyes, its staff crackling with warp lightning. When it spoke, 9 voices harmonized into a sound that made reality itch. Why do you resist, child of Jenova? You are already corrupt, already changed, already beyond salvation by their standards. Why not embrace what you truly are? Sephiroth's response was to draw Masamune. The blade materialized in his hands, 7 feet of perfect steel that sang its one nota frequency that cut through demon song like light through fog. The herald recoiled slightly, its 9 eyes narrowing in something approaching respect. Still holding to the blade? How quaint, how mortal. Then the Imperial forces arrived. Squad Cassiel teleported into the hangar bay, their armor scorched from fighting through demon-infested corridors. Behind them came battle sisters, bolt pistols blazing, their faith made manifest in fire and fury. And behind them, grim-faced and determined, came Inquisitor Malbrev himself, his force sword crackling with psychic lightning. For one frozen moment, 3 forces stood in a triangle.
Imperial, Demon, Sephiroth.
Each a threat to the others. Each uncertain who to attack first. Then, chaos small sea erupted.
Malbrev made the decision.
Kill them all. The Emperor protects. Bolters roared. Demon claws flashed. And in the center of it all, Sephiroth moved like a silver ghost, his blade ending anything that came too close regardless of allegiance. A bloodletter charged him. Masamune took its head in passing. A battle sister's aim swung toward him. He was already 10 feet to the left, disarming her without injury. The Herald of Tsinche launched warp fire. Sephiroth's wing unfolded, and somehow the flames simply stopped, frozen in midair, then dissipating.
He's protecting us, Brother Cassian shouted, realization dawning.
Watch, he's only killing demons.
It was true.
For every demon that fell to Imperial weapons, 3 fell to Masamune. Sephiroth carved through the warp-spawned tide with mechanical efficiency, his movements economical, precise, wasting no motion. He fought the way a surgeon operates, no wasted cuts, every strike exactly where it needed to be. But the demons kept coming. The warp breach widened. More horrors poured through, and with them came something that made even Sephiroth pause. A demon prince. Not a herald or lesser creature, but a true ascended champion of chaos, a being that had once been mortal and had traded its soul for power beyond measure. It was massive, 3 times Sephiroth's height, its skin a tapestry of constantly shifting faces screaming in eternal agony. When it spoke, the very air curdled. There you are, the beautiful broken thing that walks between worlds. Chaos has offered you everything. You have refused. That was unwise. The demon prince attacked. Its speed was impossible for something that large. One moment it stood at the breach's edge. The next, its claws were sweeping toward Sephiroth's head, fast enough to blur, strong enough to shatter ceramite. Sephiroth met the strike with Masamune, and the sound of their collision was like a thunderclap, like reality itself protesting the meeting of such absolute forces. They fought in a blur of motion too fast for normal eyes to follow.
Claw against blade.
Divine strength against alien perfection. The demon prince was power incarnate, every strike capable of reducing battle sisters to paste. Sephiroth was precision, each counter exactly hard enough, exactly fast enough, wasting nothing. "You should be ours!" the demon prince roared, frustration bleeding into its voice. "Your soul is already damned, your essence already corrupt. Why do you resist what you are?" "Because," Sephiroth said, his voice calm despite the intensity of combat, "I decide what I am. Not you, not them, not anyone." His wing unfolded fully. The black feathers began to glow with an inner light, and suddenly the hangar was filled with images. Illusions. Jenova's gift manifesting in ways the demon couldn't predict. A dozen Sephiroths surrounded it, each one perfect, each one real, each one striking from a different angle.
The demon prince lashed out, destroying illusion after illusion.
But the real attack came from behind Masamune, sliding between ribs that weren't quite corporeal, finding the core of the demon's essence. The demon prince screamed.
Not in pain, demons didn't feel pain but in fury.
In disbelief. It had been wounded, truly wounded.
By something that wasn't even psychic.
Impossible. I've killed gods before, Sephiroth said softly.
You're barely even a demigod.
Masamune struck again.
And again. Each cut perfect. Each strike peeling away layers of warp stuff, unmaking the demon one piece at a time.
The demon prince tried to retreat, to fade back into the Immaterium, but Sephiroth's blade somehow prevented it, holding it in real space through sheer cutting perfection, each wound anchoring it to material reality. The final strike took its head. The demon prince collapsed, its form dissolving into mist and regret, its essence screaming back into the warp, carrying a message that would echo through chaos itself. The one-winged angel could not be claimed, could not be corrupted,
Could not be stopped.
The remaining demons fled. In the sudden silence that followed, Sephiroth stood in the center of the hangar, surrounded by demon mist and shell casings, his blade gleaming, his wing folded.
He looked at the Imperial forces at Malbrev, at Squad Cassiel, at the Battle Sisters, and they looked back.
Still want to kill me? He asked quietly. Malbrev's hand tightened on his force sword.
His orders were clear. Exterminatus-level threat.
Kill on sight. But he had just watched this entity save his forces, kill demons that would have slaughtered them all, fight with honor against corruption itself. The Inquisitor's face was carved from stone as he spoke.
The order stands. You are too dangerous to exist. I know. Sephiroth turned toward a nearby fighter craft, one of the emergency evacuation vessels.
That's why I'm leaving. You won't make it past our gun batteries. Yes, Sephiroth said, climbing into the craft's cockpit with fluid grace. I will.
The fighter launched before anyone could stop it, screaming out of the hangar on pillars of fire. Gun batteries tracked it automatically. Targeting solutions formed. Firing orders went out. But somehow, every shot missed. Every lance beam found empty space.
Every missile spiraled off into the void. And by the time the Eternal Vigil's crew realized what was happening, the fighter was already beyond effective range, jumping into the warp with a flash of stolen Geller technology. On the bridge, Captain Volk stared at empty space where their prisoner had been.
He's gone. Inquisitor Malbrev stood beside him, face unreadable.
No, he's loose. The fighter emerged from the warp 3 systems away, its hull scarred but intact.
Sephiroth sat in the pilot's seat, silver hair drifting in zero gravity, his single wing folded against his back.
Through the view screen, he could see a new sun, or rather, an old sun, older than anything in his original universe, burning with the exhausted fury of a star that had watched civilizations rise and fall for billions of years.
He was free.
Truly free, for the first time since his defeat in the Lifestream.
No cage. No mission.
No destiny pulling him toward reunion or godhood or any purpose but the one he chose.
The question was, what did he choose?
Behind him, 3 forces were already moving.
The Imperium, having declared him an existential threat, would hunt him across stars.
The Ordo Malleus would deploy assassins, Astartes, perhaps even a fleet. They would not stop until he was ash scattered across the void. The Mechanicus, having studied his cells, would want to capture him for dissection and reverse engineering.
They would send explorators and Skitarii, seeking the secrets written in his DNA. And Chaos would never stop trying to claim him.
The 4 had tasted his soul, had seen what he could become in their service, and they would tempt and threaten and assault until he broke, or they did. He was the most wanted being in the galaxy, and he'd been here less than a month. Ironic, he said to the empty cockpit. I came here by accident. Now I can never leave.
The fighter's primitive navigation system showed him a galaxy unlike anything he'd known.
1,000,000 worlds, each one burning or dying or desperately clinging to existence.
Everywhere he looked, he saw war.
Not the clean war of soldiers fighting soldiers, but total war worlds burned from orgot, populations sacrificed to hunger gods. Entire sectors going dark as civilization collapsed under its own weight. This Imperium they served, this empire built around their god emperor, was dying. Slowly, inevitably, drowning in its own dogma, unable to evolve because evolution meant risk and risk meant damnation. They would rather die as humans than survive as something else.
He understood that impulse. Once he would have respected it.
But he had walked too far down his own path of transformation to believe in the sanctity of staying unchanged. Evolution wasn't corruption.
Change wasn't death.
Sometimes, survival demanded becoming something new.
The question was whether he cared enough to show them.
On a distant world, in a chamber lined with skulls, the High Lords of Terror received word of the incident.
They read the reports in silent Sephiroth's capabilities, his resistance to classification, his potential to reshape humanity itself. And without discussion, without debate, they made their decision.
The order went out to every ordo, every chapter, every battle fleet, threat designation ultima.
Resources unlimited, priority absolute.
The one-winged angel was to be destroyed, and his destruction was worth any price. In the warp, the chaos gods laughed, not from cruelty but from anticipation. Let the Imperium hunt this beautiful broken thing.
Let them chase him across stars.
Every attempt on his life would push him further from them, closer to chaos. And eventually, inevitably, he would have nowhere else to turn.
Or so they believed.
In a monastery fortress on a planet whose name was classified, Chapter Master Azrael of the Dark Angels studied the picked captures from the asterisk Eternal Vigil asterisk. He watched Sephiroth fight, watched the economy of motion, the perfect blade work, the single black wing. And something in the back of his mind whispered a question that would haunt him for years.
Asterisk, what if we're wrong?
What if he's not a threat, but an opportunity? Asterisk, he would never speak that question aloud. It was too close to heresy. But it lingered. And far away, in a dying system near the edge of Imperial space, Sephiroth set course for nowhere in particular. He would wander, he decided. Learn this new universe. Understand its rules, its factions, its endless wars.
Perhaps he would find a purpose here.
Perhaps he would simply exist, a ghost in the machine, a variable that didn't fit any equation. Or perhaps, eventually, he would do what he had always done. Remake the world to match his vision. Not for Jenova. Not for Shinra. Not for Mother or Destiny or any external purpose. But for himself. Because he was the one-winged angel, the perfect soldier who had transcended his programming. And if this universe would not accept him as he was, he would reshape it until it did. The fighter's engines flared.
Space folded. And Sephiroth disappeared into the dark between stars, leaving behind only questions and fear.
Above a war-torn world in his wake, civilians looked up and saw something impossible. A shooting star.
A falling angel.
A sign from the Emperor or a portent of doom, depending on who told the story later.
They didn't know what it meant. Neither did he, really.
But in a galaxy where hope died a little more each day, where every dawn brought fresh horror and every dusk carried the weight of impending extinction, the sight of something beautiful and terrible drifting through the void felt almost meaningful.
Like a promise. Or a warning.
Or perhaps just the beginning of a story that no one, not even the gods, could predict the ending of. Sephiroth floated above that world for a moment, suspended between stars, his wing catching the light of 1,000 burning suns. Masamune gleamed at his side. His eyes, those cold, perfect eyes, surveyed an empire he'd never asked to join and would never truly belong to. "What now?" he asked the universe. The universe, as always, didn't answer.
So he made his own answer.
He always had. The fighter turned away from the dying world and headed deeper into the void, carrying with it a single winged figure and the weight of infinite possibility. Where he would go, what he would do, who he would save or destroy, none of that was written yet. For the first time in his long, strange existence, Sephiroth's story was truly his own. And the galaxy, whether it knew it or not, had just become a far more dangerous place,